In this video, you're going to learn all the essential information and facts about IELTS Writing Task 2, both for the academic and the general training IELTS test. So you're going to learn all the essential information. I'm going to explain exactly what your task is. We're going to compare the differences between the general training and the academic test, and we'll look briefly at some of the kinds of topics that come up in Task 2. So let's start with the essential information. I'm going to talk first of all about the writing task, the writing test as a whole. So there are two writing tasks, Task 1 and Task 2, and in the general training test, you're asked to write a letter, and in the academic test, you have to write a report about a piece of visual information such as a graph or a table or a map or a diagram, and you have to write at least 150 words in Task 1. Task 2, which is what this course is all about, you're asked to write an essay. And this is the same regardless of whether you're taking the general training test or the academic test. It's both the same, although there are some differences between the two tests, which I'll explain in a moment. And you should write at least 250 words in Task 2. The writing test takes 60 minutes in its entirety, in whole, and you're recommended to spend about 20 minutes on Task 1 and about 40 minutes on Task 2, so double the amount of time on Task 2. Why is this? Well, of course, you have to write more words for Task 2, and planning Task 2 also requires a bit more time than Task 1, but there's also something else. Task 2 is double the marks of Task 1. Task 2 is double the marks of Task 1. So you should spend twice as much time on Task 2 than Task 1 because it's worth twice or double the marks, which means that if you can write a very good Task 2 essay, then your chances of getting a high band score overall for IELTS writing are very high. And that's what I'm going to try and help you do in this course. Now let's look more closely about what you have to do in writing Task 2. So what is your task in Task 2? Well, you will be given a statement on a particular topic or issue, and this statement will either present one or two commonly held opinions about this particular topic, or it will give a factual statement about the topic. And then you'll be given a question, such as, do you agree or disagree? What are the advantages and disadvantages? And I'll go into a lot more depth about these different question types in Part 2 and Part 3 of the course. The important thing to understand now is this. Regardless of the question that you get, your task is to explain what you think about this topic. Explain what you think about this topic. The questions are simply different ways to guide you in your answer. And I'll explain this in more detail later in section 1 of the course. So here, for example, is a typical writing Task 2. Here's a typical task. And as you can see at the top, it tells you to spend about 40 minutes on this task. So it tells you how long to spend on the task. And at the bottom, it tells you how many words to write, at least 250 words. Let's remove the instructions and just focus now on the topic statement and the question. So you have the topic statement at the top. So here it's a statement about a topic related to music, how music can bring people together. And it's the opinion of some people. one group of people. Some people have this particular opinion. I don't know who these people are, but according to IELTS, some people think this about music. Let's look at these people. Here are those people. Some people, they think this. They think music is a good way of bringing people of different cultures and ages together. The question then is asking you what you think about this opinion. To what extent do you agree or disagree with this opinion? So the question here is telling you how to discuss the topic. In other words, you can't just write anything you like about music. You have to make sure that your essay answers the question and also addresses the topic. So here again is the issue. Your task is to say what you think about this idea, what you think about this opinion that music is a good way of bringing people of different cultures and ages together. So that is your task. And here is another example task. So again, you have the same instructions. Let's look at the topic statement. Now this one is slightly different because it doesn't show the opinion of one group of people. It actually has two different opinions. So some people have this opinion and others have this particular opinion. Again, I don't know who these people are, but IELTS say that there are groups of people who think these different things. So we have the first group of people and they have this opinion. Now we can see films on our phones or tablets. There is no need to go to the cinema, so they'll stay at home, watch movies on their phones at home. But there is another group of people, according to IELTS, who think that to be fully enjoyed, films need to be seen in a cinema. So two different opinions about this particular topic. And the question is asking you to, well, in fact, it's not a question here. It's an instruction. Discuss both these views and give your own opinion. So sometimes you have an instruction rather than a question. But it's doing exactly the same thing as a question. The instruction here is simply telling you how to discuss the topic. So here are the two different opinions again. And your task is to say what you think about these two different opinions, and also overall, what do you think about this particular topic? What's your opinion? By the way, and I'll talk about this later in the course, your task is to talk about the two views, not about the people. You've got to focus on the different ideas that are presented to you. And this particular format, where you have a topic statement followed by a question or an instruction, is exactly the same for all IELTS questions. You're given a statement about a topic, and then the question tells you how to discuss the topic. Exactly the same format for both the general training and academic IELTS. For all IELTS Task 2 questions, same format. So what's the difference between the academic and the general training tests? Well, the main difference between the general training test and the academic test is that the academic test has more, not surprisingly, academic topics. So you might get topics on the economy or population or academic study, different academic subjects. Whereas the general training test tends to have topics that are more on everyday issues, such as travel or shopping or the family. However, there is a very big overlap between the two tests. So you can still get essays about travel or shopping or the family in the academic test, and you might get questions about the economy, population or academic study in the general training test. So there is a very big overlap, and sometimes it's quite difficult to tell if a question is from the academic or the general training test. But in general, the general training test has topics which are on more everyday issues. I don't think this makes the general training test any easier, though. It simply makes the two different tests more appropriate for their purposes, because of course people doing the academic test are going to study at university, whereas people taking the general training test tend to be doing it for work or for immigration purposes. In this course, we're going to look at tasks from both the academic and the general training tests. So let's look at a typical task from the general training test. So for example, this task is about watching movies. This is the one we looked at before. Where's the best place to watch movies, at home or in the cinema? So it's a topic that's on an everyday issue, so that's more appropriate for the general training test. And here is a task from the academic test. So the topic here is about advertising, the impact of advertising. Can it persuade people to do things? But everything else is the same. The time at the top, 40 minutes, 250 words at the bottom, is exactly the same for both the academic and the general training test. But the topic here is a little bit more academic, less everyday. There can be some differences, however, in the wording of questions between the two tests. And again, there's no hard and fast rule for this. But sometimes the questions in the general training test can be more straightforward than those in the academic test sometimes. So do you agree or disagree is the question here. This is from the general training test, so that's quite a straightforward question. Whereas in the academic test, you might get a question like this: to what extent do you agree or disagree? So if we go back to the general training, it was simply do you agree or disagree. In the academic, to what extent do you agree or disagree? So small differences like that. Again, you can get the same kind of question in both the academic and the general training test, so there's no hard and fast rule. So what kinds of topics are you likely to see in Task 2 of the IELTS writing test? In general, they are topics where you can reasonably be expected to form an opinion. Now, you might never have thought about how music can bring people together. And you might never have thought about, do you need to watch movies in the cinema or can you do it at home? But you can probably think of something to say about these kinds of topics quite quickly, especially if you practice coming up with ideas. That's something I'll explain later in the course as well. But you can reasonably be expected to form an opinion on IELTS tasks. And you should be able to do that using your own knowledge or experience. So you might have a bit of background knowledge or some experience of the topic. So for example, you might have gone to a music concert and met people from different cultures, or you might watch movies at home on your phone because you like doing it. So you've got your own experience to fall back on. And it says this in all the IELTS Task 2 questions. At the bottom it says, use examples from your own knowledge or experience. So they're going to be on topics where you can come up with an answer, basically. So IELTS Task 2 topics are not going to be obscure ones. They're not going to be on extreme issues. They're not going to be controversial issues. So you're not going to get topics on things like religion or abortion or politics. And also they won't be on topics which require some kind of specialised knowledge, like medicine or science. At least not ones in the test. You might find questions online on websites which do require some kind of special knowledge or are on extreme or controversial issues. But in the actual test written by Cambridge, you won't. There'll be questions which you can reasonably expected to form an opinion on quite quickly. So it might be on things like health, or the environment, or education. It might be on jobs or the workplace, topics on shopping or travel and family and many, many more different topics. But you should be able to answer or come up with an opinion about the topic quite quickly. With a little bit of thought, I would add. With a little bit of thought, everyone should be able to answer every IELTS task. Although it will take a bit of practice, and that's what I'm going to help you do in this course. So let's just quickly summarize your task. What is your task? So your task is to answer a question about a topic using your own knowledge or experience in at least 250 words. That's it. Answer a question about a topic using your own knowledge or experience in at least 250 words. That is your task, and you will be assessed on how well you do this. How is your essay assessed? Well, I will explain all of that in the first section of the course.